Today's episode is brought to you by Alexandra Park BJJ. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a full-contact martial art and combat sport that was developed in Brazil in the 20th century. With roots in Judo and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, has been developed and refined into a unique grappling art with the aim to allow a smaller and weaker individual to beat a bigger and stronger opponent with the application of proper technique. Based in Muswell Hill, North London, Alexandra Park BJJ's classes are designed so that you can develop your fitness levels, balance, coordination, and flexibility in a no-pressure environment, and to provide the opportunity to start a new sport at a reasonable price. At Alexandra Park BJJ, we aim to be inclusive so that everyone can benefit from this incredible art, not just the athletic or ultra-competitive. To book your free class, head over to alexandraparkbjj.co.uk or email inquiries at alexandraparkbjj.co.uk.
Welcome to Audiobookish, an audiobook review and discussion podcast looking at audiobooks both big and small, as well as radio plays, narrative podcasts, anything audiobook-ish. This podcast may contain spoilers, rants, curse words, mispronunciations of names and places, and more.
Hello everybody, you're listening to Audiobookish. My name's Fahad Rahman, and as always I'm joined by Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And today we will be discussing Leo Moon, the Aries Billionaire by Rachel Wells and Jessica Adams. And I'll read out the blurb for this one. Aries billionaire Mike Kirby is celebrating his 50th birthday on his remote island with his unhappy wife, hand-picked guests, a blood moon eclipse, and a rocket launch. A coma and a murder later, it's down to astrologer Leo Moon to uncover the truth. Join Mike, his wife Renee, her sister Rachel, and Rachel's husband Neil in their glamorous world of swimming pools, horoscopes, and deadly secrets. So firstly, I want to thank Rachel for sending us a review copy of this to listen to. Very grateful for that. If there are any other authors out there that are looking to get their audiobooks reviewed, please get in touch. We'd be more than happy to kind of have a look at them. So this is, I think, falls into the cozy crime.
Yeah, I'd say so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cozy crime category, which is not a genre that I think we've done some of it before. I think I do.
Yeah, we have. We did the second Richard Osman as part of the British Book Awards. That might be the only one we've done on here.
Yeah. So it's not a genre that I gravitate to necessarily. So it had that little bit of a hill to climb in my head because it's this is not really the sort of thing I'd necessarily pick out to read or listen to intentionally. Yeah, and then kind of the other thing is I'm just going off vibes at the moment, so it just might be a bit of a stream of consciousness. One of the things that it sort of reminded me of was I used to be a huge fan of Jonathan Creek, and it it sort of gave me that kind of quirky kind of, lots of interesting characters that are quipping at each other and, making comments towards each other that kind of reminded me of that. But it's very much like the anti-Jonathan Creek because Jonathan Creek was all about logic and having a reasonable explanation for where this is very much like the opposite of that. Like Leo's very much, the star signs are saying that what's happening can't be happening, so I need to find another explanation for that. So I found that kind of quite curious. It seemed to me like his entire motivation for investigating the crimes that happened on the island were just to kind of prove his beliefs true. And I'm not too sure how I felt about it. What type of vibes did you kind of get off the book?
Yeah, so definitely cozy crime, like you say.
Yeah.
And it isn't something I've read or listened to much of either, but I have watched a lot of TV cozy crime. It probably is something that I gravitate towards on TV. So I guess I felt a bit more familiar with the genre, a bit more keen to, it didn't have to climb the hill for me. And then, yeah, interesting that you say about Jonathan Creek. That was something I liked as well. Wasn't there, like, magic element to that? Or is that just one episode that I'm thinking of?
Yeah, so with Jonathan Creek, he is a magician's assistant.
Yes,
so he's he's very much a magician's assistant in the vein of, like, Penn and Teller, where, like, that for him, it's like, right, I'm going to show you how the trick is done, because, like, anyone that tells you that they've got magic powers is obviously lying. But in terms of, like, the vibe of that show had, it kind of like, I mean, I remember there's one joke in Jonathan Creek that I think still sticks in my head, where they made a bet about whether or not a police officer was male or female or not. And it wasn't like a trans thing. It's just like they genuinely couldn't decide off the officer's name and their appearance. And they kept on losing the bet to each other, because if that proves that that officer's a, so it's kind of like that sort of thing. So, and it had a similar quirky style of humor in this as well. So yeah.
Yeah, no, fair. I just thought it was interesting that kind of, if I was remembering it rightly, about that sort of magic link, and then obviously a different thing, but that idea of having a thread through it, with this one obviously being the astrology stuff. And I wanted to talk about that because I think for a lot of it, I was kind of just, okay, sure, I'll follow along with what you're saying, right? So, like, he'd say, the charts say this, the stars mean that, and I'd be like, okay, sure, I'll take that on face value, go for it. And that was fine. But what I liked was, nearer the end, there were a couple instances where it was more like the astrology gives clues. So there was a bit about Pluto, and there was a bit as well about, like, a specific feature of this eclipse and what it meant, and what it meant that they went and looked for, that I thought worked really well. And that's something that I think in future ones in the series, because, yeah, they have planned to do one for each star sign, I believe. I would like that to be in there even more, you know, so that the listener, and certainly the listener who doesn't know astrology very well, but I think even if you did, there was a lot where it was just kind of like, the charts say this, and you go, okay, without you having the charts. I think even if you know, you wouldn't know, kind of thing. But yeah, that's something that I'd like more of in the other ones, where it's like, we can follow the clue of, you know, this planet, this star, this meaning of this astrological event is sending the investigation in this direction or in that direction and stuff. So I quite liked those. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I thought that it was kind of like, I agree with you. It's kind of, you could kind of forgive it a little bit, because this is like his first adventure and he didn't really know what he was doing. And then like him kind of towards the end of the book, where he is a little bit lost, he does kind of like, well, let me have a look at the star charts again. And then, so maybe to explain a little bit about the team that we're working with. So we've got Leo Moon, we've got his mum, Helena, and like Karen. And I'm not, how would you describe like Karen's relationship with like Helen and Leo? Is it just like Leo's friends?
Yeah, she's Leo's friend.
Yeah.
A journalist from America.
Yeah. And they're invited to this island because Helena is the, I always going to get in trouble. Is it the astrology? Yes, that's the, astronomy is the science, isn't it?
So she's the astrologer, yeah, I think so.
Yes, she's the astrologer for this billionaire who's very much sort of in the vein of Elon Musk, I'd guess. And they turn up to this island as part of these birthday plans and this rocket launch. And yeah, their chemistry's kind of quite interesting. But yeah, like his reliance on the star signs kind of really stems from like him going back to his mum and his mum saying like, you need to look at this again, and then kind of getting hints from his mum, because his mum's very sort of passive in the story. She's kind of like, how would you describe his mum's character? Actually, I think that's kind of like a interesting take, because she's very like kind of, if I was like casting her to have maybe someone like Dame Maggie Smith in that sort of role, she gives off very much that much of that sort of energy. I don't know how to describe. I certainly don't know what like specific words I could put to her. But maybe she has kind of a bit of a Nanny Ogg kind of character about her. Something like that. She's kind of quite eccentric, but also can be quite serious at times. They make quite a lot of her being into toy boys and enjoying having fun. But then also she does want, well, she doesn't necessarily want to get the job done. She wants the job to get done, and she's happy for Leo to do it. And she's kind of judgy
for other characters. So especially there's Mystic Marjorie, who instead of looking at astrology, consults the spirits, and she's very disparaging towards her and quite judgy and stuff. So she's an interesting character. And I think one of the notes that I had down here was that I think those 3 core characters, there's a lot of scope for them in future books. You know, we've been introduced to them, well, their characters have been well established, even if I can't put it into good words to describe them. And yeah, I think there's a lot of space for them to be involved in more adventures, for their relationships to change, for their dynamics to change, for their characters to develop, just all sorts of things that I think there's a lot that you can take from those 3.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely agree with that. I think I also kind of quite like the fact that, you know, Helena's not Karen's biggest fan. And then, the other thing I liked about Helena's character is that she's very much happy to be like the front person, but is like, it seems like Leo maybe does more of like the legwork behind the scenes. He's very kind of and that's the other reason why it reminded me of like Jonathan Creek, because Jonathan Creek he designed the magic tricks, but he wasn't really that comfortable being on stage and performing them. So I think that's very similar to kind of like Leo's character. He seems to be a little bit reluctant to be front and center stage. Yeah, good. I did want to briefly touch on Helena's relationship with Marjorie, who is the ghost whisperer, I guess we could kind of say. And I just found it hilarious that as someone who's maybe a bit skeptical about these things, that these 2 branches of what I would consider like nonsense look down on each other. So I felt that as kind of like, no, ghosts are kind of like, you know, obviously Marjorie isn't effective in her kind of like her use of like tapping into the spirit world, but, you know, and Helena and Leo are effective with their use of star signs. But I did find that kind of quite funny that these 2 branches of like nonsense kind of like were a little bit at war.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it reminded me of, there's bits in Ghosts, you know, the BBC show, where the ghosts are like, imagine believing in ghosts, that's ridiculous. And it's like, yeah, but we are real. So I like, it's a similar kind of joke there that comes across well in this. It's quite fun. Yeah.
So I need to make a little bit of confession with my review. I may have fell asleep during my listening of this on Sunday evening. I just put the audiobook down and just kind of like, I might have fallen asleep for a little bit. So there might have been some details that I missed out in terms of like the of like the murder mystery side of things. But I think I did catch the general gist. In terms of how the mystery was set out, how effective and engaging do you think that was?
Yeah, I thought it was quite good, actually. I definitely did find myself drawn in. In fact, I have written down here, found myself drawn in by the mystery. So I don't think I necessarily was like right from the off. I think I needed to warm up into it. But once it got to the meatier stuff of the plot, I did find myself going, oh, what happened there? What was that character doing at that point? Where are we going to go next? Stuff like that, and the twists. I think that was quite good. What about you?
Yeah, I think it was quite well plotted, just in terms of like the timing in which each twist and turn happened in the plot. Is kind of you think it's going one way, then an event happens that turns everything around, and then you think it's going another way, then an event happens that turns everything out, or a character says something, or someone goes missing, or a piece of evidence is found. I felt all that was generally well put together. And I thought in terms of like the other, I think the plotting is probably comparable to the other cozy crime thing we read with Richard Osman. Both of those are kind of quite similar in the way how well that they were plotted, I guess.
Cool, fair enough. Yeah. I wanted to say, while we're kind of on writing, I did have a slight criticism about the writing style. Just because there are a lot of characters in this. You know, you've got these 3 core ones. We've already said about Mystic Marjorie. That's before you even get into, you know, Mike, Neil, Renee, Rachel, Susie, Alice. You know, there's a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's fair enough, and I can understand as well how that then causes a challenge. But what I did find is that so much of the book is just lists of said Leo, said Marjorie, then Leo went and stood over there, and Marjorie did this, and then Helena did that, and it was so much of name, action, or dialogue, said name.
Or reacted,
Yeah, no, exactly. So I didn't quite like that as much. That it felt quite repetitive. It wasn't as nice a flow as I would hope it would be. So that is a bit of a criticism on the writing style. It sort of seemed a bit like these were sort of, if this were a visual medium, then you would see those actions happen, or you would see who was speaking and you wouldn't need them and they would work that way. But in this case, it's kind of like those stage directions of the screenplay have been read out, and I didn't really love that. And especially I think with this being, for audio, that a lot of the saids could have been cut out, and that might have been better, like, especially because the character voices are all so distinct.
Yeah. You work in audio. Is that something, can you edit the text like that when you're recording the audiobook, kind of just take out the saids and stuff like that? Or is that kind of a discussion you need to have with the authors and the publishers and stuff?
So mostly the aim is for it to be word for word.
Okay.
But there are publishers that will do stuff like that, and especially the His Dark Materials books that we reviewed and that are my childhood favourites. I know there was one of my re-listens where I did a bit of reading along with the text and saw that they had taken out he says and she said. So it was still, I think it was fair to say that they're marketing it as they market it as unabridged, but they'd felt this is full cast, we know the character's voice, we can forgo that he said, she said, and I think that was the right decision there. And in this one, that would have been good as well. Especially because with it being written for audio, you can kind of take that into account. It's not a case of cutting them from the print version. It's just not putting them in if they're not needed kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe something they might address in future books.
Yeah, possibly.
As well, yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a strength of it that those character voices were so distinct, though.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny because, everyone has a very separate voice, often a very separate accent, clearly deliberate for that differentiation. They are quite kind of caricatured, both voices and accents, I think. But I think because of the tone of the book, it's fun, it's cozy. I'm by no means, criticising the narrator, Oliver Chris, and saying his accents were bad. I'm not saying that at all, but they are very much kind of they are caricature-y. Because the characters are and stuff like that. So yeah, and I did really like on accents, there's a bit that is in the text about how one of the characters imitates one of the others' Birmingham accent and does a very definitely not Birmingham accent. And I thought that was A, just a really funny thing that they included anyway, and B, very well done by the narrator to, even before someone's commented on it, you go, that doesn't sound anything like it, and then someone goes, was that meant to be a Birmingham accent? So yeah, I thought that was good. What do you think of the narration?
I thought the narration was pretty good overall. Again, this is very much a me thing. His narrating voice did remind me of a character in a cartoon that I used to watch. So whenever he was saying something, that kept on bringing me out of the audiobook listening experience. And that's not his fault. That's just my brain making weird connections to stuff. And you do bring your own baggage to things. But I thought he did a really great job of capturing the tone of the text.
Yeah, I think so as well.
And I think his pace and the delivery of some of the more humorous lines, as the one you mentioned about the accent attempt, were performed really well. And yeah, I kind of enjoyed his performance to a certain extent, but just having that, hear that reference in the back of my head kind of did unfortunately take me out of the performance a little bit. But I did have a kind of a look at other stuff that he's performed, and he's done a lot of different, so it'd be interesting to see whether, when you're listening to a narrator, you just think, is this the voice that they use for every book or not? And I was just thinking, maybe this is just a voice he's using for this particular book, because, and then maybe interested to kind of see if I'd have the same reaction to all the audiobooks that he'd done or not, kind of making that silly connection in my head.
No, that's fair. It reminded me actually as well, a colleague of mine said of something we were listening to this week, because we could hear kind of the narrating, and then you heard a bit of talking to the producer, and then she was saying how it's cool to hear his normal voice as opposed to his narrating voice and stuff like that. So that is very fair.
Yeah, in terms of the, I'm going to come to my main gripe with the book now. So basically, the story is about a billionaire. The main victims of the book are all kind of quite unpleasant people, and I know that's a feature of crime, whether it's cozy or otherwise. But I had a real hard time, generating any sympathy for any of like the main characters outside of our detectives. I had like basically no sympathy for Mike Kirby. I thought he was an idiot. I didn't really like his wife Renee, who comes across very much as I don't know, how would you describe Renee's character? As kind of like very much like a trophy wife type person. And then kind of like both Rachel and Neil kind of grated on me as well. So it was, I found it hard to enjoy spending my time with these characters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. As well developed as they were in terms of like the text, you got a real firm idea of who Mike was and what his character was like, as you do with Renee, as you do with Rachel, and as you do with Neil. So in terms of like the quality of the writing there, I think was pretty good, because you can kind of understand what each individual character's motivations and how they relate to each other. But just in terms of like me, like if I met Mike in real life, I'd have a real strong urge to kind of like just punch him repeatedly in the face. And maybe that is the writer's intention, but I found it pretty hard going. How about you? Did you take to kind of Mike, Renee, Rachel, or did you find them as contemptible as maybe I did?
I think I probably have a similar opinion of them. But I, like you say, it kind of is a bit of a feature of the genre, and especially I think cozy crime, because like if murders happen, but you're trying to make it cozy and happy, how do you do that? And one of the ways is to kind of like make you not so invested in the victims. It makes it a bit easier to swallow, and so you can enjoy the mystery a bit more and stuff like that. And I do think it's interesting, especially this episode following Edith that we discussed as well, for the kind of like, we spoke about, did we find that the production was like criticising a character in it, in their morals?
Yes.
And this one, I think, it doesn't ask you to like Mike Kirby.
Yeah.
It tells you a lot of different ways that he is not a good guy.
Yeah.
And I think, it does point out criticisms for him. And, he's horrible to people. He uses his money in selfish ways. He's trying to destroy the environment, like stuff like that. And it is very clearly like, we're not on the side of this, even though, Helena in a kind of has quite a friendship with him and does quite like him. Yeah, it seems that has a fondness for him anyway. So I thought that was interesting. But it was still very clear on the we're not endorsing this billionaire.
I think that's kind of quite clear. I think we've kind of mentioned the dialogue a little bit. I think especially Helena, I think she's probably maybe got the best lines in the book.
Fair.
I think we maybe should talk a little bit about Leo, just in terms of if this is going to be an ongoing series, whether or not you've found him to be like an engaging enough protagonist to kind of carry a series like this or not.
Yeah, I think probably my answer to that is because I think that with him and Karen and Helena, definitely.
Yes.
Because kind of the trio of them working together, I think works. I maybe can see what you're getting at with that, of that Leo on his own, maybe not, I don't know. But part of his character is his close relationships, both with his mum and with his friend Karen, and that interplay there. And I definitely think there's a lot there to draw you in and keep you invested, and to be, like I say, played on in the future ones and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, okay, so my last note that I've gotten written down is a bit of a criticism of the text. Like you mentioned, he said they reacted. My little criticism of the text is it did feel a little bit at times like tell not show.
I think the two kind of tie together a bit, don't they?
Yeah. So I think, despite that, I think it was generally well written for the most part, but I think he said, she said, like you mentioned, kind of a long list of like character, and it's difficult how, as an author, how do you have, especially the climax scene where, as in all cozy crime dramas, like all the characters are gathered together, very like Agatha Christie in one room,
for the big reveal.
For the big reveal, how do you write that scene without saying that person gasped there and thing reacted in such a way? But I think that's something they might need to kind of work on a little bit going forwards as well. So, have you got any other notes that you wanted to touch on?
Some quick things is kind of like, again, on the writing, like, yeah, we sort of touched on it with plotting, but there were definitely bits of that I thought were good in the sense of like how all the different threads of different people's plans came together, and that was clever. That something that you might think is insignificant, it actually turns out that was completely calculated and part of the plan. So stuff like that I thought was really cool. And another one, there's a scene where someone is being affected by medication, and I found that scene very powerful and very well written. That kind of like, you really did get the sense of them kind of getting dizzier, them kind of feeling less themselves, feeling less stable, stuff like that. I don't know, it just stood out to me, that scene, as being particularly well written, getting inside their head experience, losing sense of themselves, that I thought was, I thought that was written really well. And then another good one on the performance, but obviously kind of tied with the writing, I would have thought, was when Marjorie is drunk and there's hiccups in there. Yes, I enjoyed that in the audio. I thought that worked quite well as well. Yeah,
I think that was kind of quite clever how he managed to kind of incorporate that into his performance as well. So yeah, I think we've probably come to our recommendations. Then how do you feel about this book kind of like generally, and would you recommend it to people?
Yeah, I think I would recommend it. I thought it was good. Certainly if you like your cozy crimes, then I think give it a go. If you have an interest in astrology, give it a go. Even if you don't, I think you can find it interesting. And yeah, the different characters are good. The performance, but just because I was thinking of all the different characters. But the performance was really good. I thought it was a good production, and yeah, a compelling mystery in there. So yeah, I think I would recommend.
Yeah, I feel bad for saying this, but it just wasn't for me. Unfortunately, I think it's quite telling that I did maybe perhaps fall asleep for a section of the book, and I don't usually do that when I'm listening to, even when I'm lying down. I usually am able to stay awake. Yeah, I think it almost went over that hill where, I mentioned at the start, kind of like, this is not a genre that I normally engage with, and it didn't quite get over that barrier. For me, I just found it for my taste to be a little bit too silly. I found the characters a little bit too contemptible, and as good as the performance was, because of that thing in my head that the narrator sounded like a cartoon character from a completely different thing, also took me out of it. So I think a lot of the reason why I'd struggle to recommend it is on my personal taste, and that's all we've got to go on, unfortunately.
Exactly. And it's just more a case that you wouldn't actively recommend it, but you wouldn't either tell people they shouldn't.
If you're into kind of like cozy crime, kind of like the Richard Osman's kind of like not Murder, She Wrote. Yeah, maybe Murder, She Wrote, that sort of thing. I think this is definitely something that, and if you're a fan, as I mentioned, of like TV shows like Jonathan Creek or Midsummer Murders, I think this is definitely a series that you could get into and enjoy. It's just like, for me, it just wasn't something I can kind of like sit down and say, yeah, I enjoyed it and recommend it.
No, so, that's fair. I think it's also worth saying as well, it is only 5 hours 25.
Yes.
So, it's quite a short one. If you do want something short for a specific purpose, or you want to give it a go, but you don't want to, have this big, massive book that you're getting yourself in for, it's not. It's a short one. So maybe that'll be another window for giving it a go.
Yeah. And I believe this is an Audible exclusive, so that I think that's the only place that you can listen to it on at the moment. So thank you once again, Rachel, for sending us a review copy. Just a small announcement that we're going to make at the end of the podcast. We're going to be moving our regular episodes to Wednesdays. This is so we can release the episodes on Tuesdays for our Patreon. So if you want to get that Tuesday fix in, you can subscribe to our Patreon, and we'll release the episodes there a day early. If you can please continue to support the pod by leaving a rating or a review wherever you find us. And if you want to get in touch, you can get in touch with us either by email at audiobookishpod@gmail.com or on social media at audiobookishpod. We're on Facebook, X, and Instagram and TikTok and all that good stuff. So I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys. Let's say bye.
Bye.
Bye.